So, Rochana, tell us a little bit about you. Who are you, and where do you live in Sri Lanka? And then we'll move on from there. Don't tell too much. Just who you are, where you live. That would be enough.
Yeah. So my name is Rochana Jayasinghe. I'm currently working as a temporary lecturer in the Department of English, Faculty of Arts, University of Peradeniya, and I live in Kandy. Yeah.
Okay, so I think I know your dad. Your dad is here as well, and some of the people in this audience might know him. Ananda, you want to say hi to everybody? So Ananda Jayasinghe is your dad, and he is the professor of community medicine in Peradeniya.
Yeah, professor in community medicine.
Professor Ananda, you want to say hi? Just say something. You're muted.
Yeah, Kathy, I'm muted.
you need to go and help him?
No,
still muted.
It's okay.
It's okay. It's all right. Oh,
yeah, I'm all right now. I'm finally listening to all of this.
Thank you very much, Anand. I'm sure there are a few guys. Udita is here from Peradeniya, and there are a few other Peradeniya graduates as well. Anyway, thank you very much. So coming back to Rochana, which school did you go to in Kandy?
I went to Kandy Girls High School.
Okay, and what were your interests? How did you end up in the Department of English? Were you interested in literary work from a very young age, or why did you end up there?
Yes, so I've been reading ever since I can remember. I think my mother taught my sister, and then my sister, taught me the art of reading, and taught me to read as a hobby. And then I just started reading, and I never really stopped. And that's why I started. That's how my interest in literature began. I think that's a very common entrance to literature. I think for a lot of us, those of us who grew up reading. So yes, nothing unusual. It's just that. And then I decided to make a career out of reading and teaching literature.
Okay, so then you joined the Department of English at Peradeniya University, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then I believe you started this, or I don't know the details about it. You were part of what we call the Plain Tea Forum, isn't it? Just tell us something about it so that everybody will know.
Okay. So actually, my friend is also here, Amanti Pusipitiya. Amanti and another batch. Amanti is my batchmate, and she's also my best friend. The two of us and another batchmate of ours called Buddhisha Veerasurya. The three of us got together and founded this platform called Plain Tea Talk Space. We founded it in 2020, right in the middle of COVID. We realized that we didn't have any intellectual stimulation because we couldn't be at university. We were final year students at that time. So we were really missing our Plain Tea talks at campus, at campus, in the campus canteen. And we decided to have something online. And since 2020 August, we've been having Plain Tea sessions every week. It's a weekly meeting. It's a weekly web discussion platform. And also the name Plain Tea itself, I think it shows a kind of democratic platform we want to be, because plain tea is this drink that everyone drinks, right? You can find it anywhere, and that's the sort of values that that is the value that we espouse as a web discussion, as an academic web discussion platform. Yes, so that is it about the Plain Tea Talk Space. We meet every Saturday at 8 p.m. Sri Lankan time. And Dr. Bisoisa, and I've seen other people as well from SLLS join Plain Tea, and I'm really grateful. It's really encouraging that you also join our talks. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed some of those talks. I was there even yesterday listening to that film review on Changi Hora. I haven't seen the film, but I've seen the clips of it. It's a very interesting talk. And thank you very much for arranging those talks. Now, the next question is, what are your career intentions, Rochana? What do you want to do? What's your next step?
I'm currently in the Department of English, and then I want to pursue my master's studies in literature in the field of English, and that would be my next step.
Good. Okay. So we wish you all the very best in your career, and this is the time which we will give you to start your presentation. So you can now start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. A very good afternoon and good evening to those of you in Sri Lanka. I'm really excited to be doing this presentation here at this platform. And I was very happy to be invited back by Dr. Duan Bisois as well to conduct a presentation here. So my presentation is titled, I'll start sharing in a bit. I just want to talk a little bit about what I'm going to present to you today. My presentation is titled, Do We Live Upside Down? How Maps Shape Our Worldview. So while there are so many types of maps everywhere of different countries, cities, and then we have Google Maps as well, my presentation is based on world maps exclusively. So my question, do we live upside down? Finding answers to that question will have to wait till the latter part of my presentation, because there is a lot of background to it that I need to set before arriving at whatever conclusion I hope to arrive at. Because if I straight get into it, it's going to sound very much like conspiracy theory. So let's avoid that. I mean, my whole premise is that maps are not objective, and that they're political projects and very much socially and culturally constructed. We have cartography, right? Map making, and then we have critical cartography. So British geographer Brian Harley was one of the pioneers of the school of thought that views map making as a human construct shaped by political motivations of power. So a map is a document with significant power that makes all of us unquestioningly accept it. Because after all, humans are encouraged to accept visual evidence and to essentially believe what we see. So the map is very easily then seen as a pictorial depiction of space and territory that helps people navigate with facility, basically, right? To navigate their own spatial positioning. So from road maps to maps used in school education and to the contemporary satellite-powered Google Maps, maps are usually taken to be an objective reality, right, or an absolute truth. So perhaps due to this very believability of the map, the map is very often a tool that is wielded to propagate political propaganda. So, I mean, these maps obviously belong to the persuasive branch of cartography, where maps are used for political propaganda. But one thing we must remember is that we should not assume that it is only such maps, propaganda maps, that serve political purposes. So in fact, what we would call a normal or natural map might sometimes serve far more pervasive political designs. So the map of the world, I'll share that in a bit. The map of the world, or any map, is something that divides up its land space in terms of territorial control and political authority, right? So the map is an assertion of power, of sovereignty. So because of all of this, it is a little impossible to ignore that there are definitely imperial aspects to map making or cartography, and especially so when we consider the world map. So well, I've grown up in Sri Lanka, so as living in a former colony of European powers, we are very well aware of the nature of European ideologies that have sort of seeped into our indigenous knowledge systems. So similarly, a conscious effort should be taken to read against the grain when it comes to objective realities that are presented to us. And one such objective reality is the world map. So to read against the grain would be to forget what we already know of the world and to start seeing the world with a new pair of eyes. To a certain extent, we'll have to start questioning this grand narrative of the world map. So I'm going to show some examples, because otherwise, like I said, it might sound too much like a conspiracy theory or something. And anyway, this is an interesting time to be doing this presentation, especially when we have an entire war going on at the moment. I mean, we are constantly and consistently shown that borders are arbitrary, national independence is arbitrary, and even territorial control is arbitrary. So let me share my presentation. Okay. Yeah. So this is the world map that we all know, right? The world map that we all know and love, the world map that we are comfortable with. So now I'm going to talk to you about how I make sense of geography. As a literature student, I'm a student of literature, so I tend to hunt for symbols and themes in whatever I see. So I read maps pretty much the same way. So can you tell me if you can see my second slide, the one that says geography? Sorry, you're on mute. Is it the second slide? I can't, you're on mute.
Yes, madam.
Yeah,
Okay, right. Okay, you can see it. Okay, thank you. Right. So geography comes from the terms geographeia, which means writing of the earth. So if there is writing of the earth, someone has to do the writing, and then someone does the reading. So maps are documents, right? And maps are usually projected as scientific. You have all these measurements and scales and coordinates. So it is a scientific image which shows us how things are. But then we tend to ignore the fact that maps are documents which are still under construction, right? We see maps changing all the time, right? So does a map actually show how things are, or how we believe things should be? In other words, do maps represent reality? Do they show things as they are, or do they create reality? So we know a lot of examples like this, but I'll get into that. So so if maps do represent reality, whose reality is represented, and for whom is this reality created? So I'm not saying maps are wrong, but it might be helpful to look at documents which show something about the world, but not necessarily the whole picture of the world. So they do show some truth, but not necessarily the entire truth. So as a literature student, I see the map as a document that that has immense storytelling power. With each map comes a different story, and there are obviously many sides to a story. And maps don't always tell the truth, but they may create a certain truth. So I think this is a map that we are all pretty much familiar with these days. We see maps of how the COVID pandemic has sort of grasped parts of the the world. So the color red is something that, that has come to represent disease. And this is why the color red has been used to map the COVID-19 spread expansion as well. But then there is also something else that has been marked in red, and this is also something that we are familiar with. This was a map during the Cold War, 1980, and you see all the pro-Russian countries or the pro-communist and socialist countries, they're in red, right? So, and they're in red because the color of communism is red, and red is supposed to represent the blood of martyrs, of workers who died in their fight against capitalism. So, in color psychology, so these things are very much true, right? Color psychology. And color psychology does have a hold on us. That does have a massive impact on us. So in color psychology, red means vitality. But this is the same color that has been used to show diseases as well. But how come? Because originally this was a color that was supposed to represent vitality and also blood and toil of all the hard work against capitalism, right? So but then with the COVID-19 pandemic and also other diseases, all the map makers, they started to use red to denote disease as well. So so communism is also seen as something like that. It was once called the Red Scare or the Red Menace, right? And this is a map that was made by the United States, Communist Contagion. So basically communism being a disease, right? Being a contagion, being a contagious disease, being an infection that spreads around the entire world. So that is to show that communism is a threat. So this is not me showing support for communism and socialism, obviously, definitely not. But I just want to bring up the point that communism is bad in a world where capitalism has been projected as the way to move forward, because capitalism has been projected as the norm. So communism is bad in a world where individual rights are emphasized on, but not collective rights. So it was necessary for certain world powers to project communism as a disease, because diseases kill people. So they were trying to portray Russia and all these pro-communist powers as a disease trying to take over the world, and that would be like the plague, right? So these are propaganda maps. So if it were the other way around, if it were Russia who was the main world power at the moment, maybe blue would have been the color of disease, because so this is a map of the NATO countries. So these are all the NATO countries, and then you have Russia somewhere here. And if you can see now, the United States has sort of taken all these European countries which are very close to Russia into their fold, right? So then Putin says that he's waging this war for protection, for his protection, and then we're like, Russia is a huge country. Why would he want protection? But what he's talking about is how America has sort of taken control of all these other countries very close to Russian border. I think with the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991, there was an agreement verbal agreement between Russia and the United States where United States promised not to expand, but then with NATO they kind of did. And the premise is that we are going to take any country that is eligible, that fulfills requirements of our membership, But then it's kind of clear that, they are just aiming for all the European countries which are, bordering Russia. So yes, so this is something that we all need to maybe think about as well, because media is also sort of controlled by various imperial powers. So anyway, these are all propaganda maps, and we've had propaganda. There are so many other propaganda maps. There are so many World War propaganda maps, which are just marvelous, but I couldn't bring them here. And then we had propaganda maps here in Sri Lanka as well during our war. Now these are very obviously maps that serve propaganda purposes. And propaganda through cartography, through maps, is very easy because, as I said before, we tend to believe what we see. So it's very easy to show us a picture, and then we'll believe whatever that we see. But then, like I said before, it is not only these obviously propagandist maps that serve some political purpose. Even the most normal map, like the world map, for example, this can also be something that serves a particular political purpose. So we'll take a look at some of them. So I think this is also a map that we are quite familiar with. At school, when we for history or geography, we would have learned all of these, trade routes and how European colonizers went all over the whole world and caught these places, and how they had their trade routes arranged. So again, we're looking at it in the perspective. We're looking at it from the perspective of European powers. We haven't really seen a world map where we see the trade routes or the traveling routes of some other powers, right? We only know of the European trade routes and the traveling routes. So that itself, so at that very young age, I think we start learning this in grade 6 or something. So then we are taught that, okay, the European travelers, they are sort of the masters, and our location here, I think that is a very strategic location if you look at the world map the way it is. And I mean, it's good for us because we are sort of in the center of it. I mean, it's very visible, the country. I mean, yeah, I mean, it kind of is, I guess. Yeah. So this map is good for us, but there are other world maps where we are not, placed in so much of a prominent place, and we can have a discussion about that as well. So maps are definitely documents which have very much political connotations. So these are different ways of projecting the world map. These are called projections. Because it's so the world is a sphere, right? It's a globe, so it's hard to put a sphere on a flat piece of paper. So the geographers came up with projections, ways of transferring a sphere into a rectangle, and this is done with a mathematical equation. I'm sure. I mean, there might be people who geographers here as well, so I'm not going to try to explain it. So you see, there are so many different variations of the world map. So I just wanted to show this, and also to say that there is no right projection, right? Because whatever map that you're going to draw is bound to be a little wrong somehow or the other, because it's never going to be completely accurate when you put a sphere onto the rectangle. And then there are other ways of mapping the world. So for example, by population. So you have India and China, huge, and then you have the other countries as well. So this is mapped according to the population. And then this would be my favorite orientation. So here you have the south up and the north down. So this is a very uncomfortable image for most of us. I mean, I hope it does make you uncomfortable, but it's quite important and essential. And I'll talk more about that in a bit, because this is essentially the main premise of my presentation. So I invite you to take a good look at it. So you have Australia here and Brazil here. So it's basically everything turned upside down. And you have Europe here, Russia here, Canada, United States. So the prominence then here in this particular map is on Africa, I guess. Yeah, and then you have the global north. Here is the the global south, right? So yeah, okay. So as I said before, maps are documents that are constantly under construction. So this meme I included here, it says, not sure if I'm terrible at geography or if people keep making up new countries. So what we tend to, we know that, things change, right? We know that these maps change because, new countries keep coming all the time. Borders are negotiated and renegotiated all the time, every day. So maybe last year's world map won't be relevant today. Maybe last week's world map won't be relevant today. And maybe yesterday's world map won't be relevant today. So one classic example is, of course, Europe. I mean, there are so many European countries that just don't exist anymore. You have Czechoslovakia, which has now become Czech Republic and Slovakia. Then you have Prussia, and so many other countries, right? And the United States of Ionian Islands, I think that was an independent country for like 14 years or something, near Greece. And then you have the Austria-Hungarian Empire, and so a lot. And also, I mean, even countries like France, Spain, they were all these tiny entities that were sort of brought together. So Europe is pretty much one of those examples, and then you have United Kingdom also, obviously. And then, like Czechoslovakia, then you have Yugoslavia as well, which has constantly kept changing since 1991. This one country, Yugoslavia broke into 9 countries. So in 1991, Croatia, Slovenia, Macedonia, and then in 1992, Bosnia. In 2006, Montenegro, and then the latest one, 2008, Kosovo. It's still not recognized by the US, I think, but as far as they're concerned, they are a separate country, Kosovo. So you see, the world map is always changing, and we do know this, but we kind of forget that this is very much related to politics. By the way, just to bring in some trivia about Yugoslavia, I'm sure there are people who know of this anyway, but I'll just bring in. So Yugoslavia, when it was a monarchy, princess, I think her name was Katerina, I'm not sure. She married a Sri Lankan, Sir Desmond de Silva, who is the son of Georgie de Silva. And they have a daughter, Victoria, and she's, I think she is somewhere down the line of the, succession line of the throne, of the British throne, I think. I'm not sure, but yeah, they are related to Queen Victoria. So, there's something there. So I just wanted to bring that in. Her name is Victoria de Silva. Yes. So, and then we have the world's newest country in 2011, South Sudan. So you see, these countries have been coming up all the time, and the maps have been changing all the time. And we know this. We know that these changes happen, but we forget that that these are not objective realities. And then you have enclaves like this, very strange enclaves. So like you have the Vatican City inside in Italy and San Marino in Italy. There's this part of India which has parts of Bangladesh inside it, which Bangladesh enclaves. And if you can see here, so this is India. I think this is a German map. So a map in the German language. This is India, and then you have Bangladesh enclaves here, and then inside one Bangladesh enclave, you have an Indian enclave. So in a situation like this, even going to the market can be a little problematic, because you're going to a different country, and unlike in Europe, where it's easy to just cross the border without without facing major issues. Here you might have a bit of an issue, because even here you are kind of required to have visa, and I don't think that was the case inside these enclaves, but pretty much going to the market every day could be going over to a different country. So then, and even this was pretty much arbitrary. I think this was a mistake that happened during between two Maharajas. I think they were playing a game of chess or something, and then they ended up dividing these territories. And you see, that was also pretty much a mistake. So do maps then reflect reality, or do maps create a reality? So anyway, this dispute was resolved in 2015. But there are still problems, because these people, they can't figure out if they want to be Indian or Bangladesh. So the governments have given them the choice, but then how do you know what citizenship you want to be? How do you know what nationality you want to be? Right? So the people do have these problems still. So what we know from these examples is that what we learn from these examples is that borders are abstract. So until someone goes and draws a line or draws a margin, we don't know that that margin exists, right? If that makes sense. So I mean, I think being an island, we are very lucky, but then, I mean, we obviously had our own problems. But if you take, mainlands, you start to wonder, where do you draw the line in, these big countries? Is the land divided first, or does the map do the dividing of the land for everyone else? So are maps then natural and depoliticized? Is it some abstract geography reality that maps project? So we know this, but unless we are interested in politics, we don't really think about these sometimes. All of this just goes to show that there is no real geographical reality. Everything is sort of human made. Even borders are artificial. Borders are human made. A new country is going to just be a rearrangement of borders. It is not essentially some objective reality. And that brings me to my next set of questions. What is a nation exactly, and what is a country? And is a country always a nation? So the nation concept itself is a Western concept, right? This is something that came up during the early modern periods of European history, during European Enlightenment. Because this came up somewhere in the mid 1700s. So most nations, as we know it, are pretty much influenced by this, European ways of categorizing nations. So in the early modern period, if you're a country, you have to have one language. So which is why the nations, as they're divided now, India and in all the colonies and all the former colonies, this is why we have a lot of problems in our countries, a lot of ethnic conflicts and tensions, because this model of the nation doesn't always suit us. Because the model of the nation is that if you're one country, you should have one language. I think, having said that, though, I also think we also sort of have it a little better, because if you say you're from Sri Lanka, and if someone asks you if you speak Sri Lankan, you can always say no. There are two languages in our country, Sinhala and Tamil. There's no language called Sri Lankan language. And if there's an Indian would always say there is no Indian language. We have several languages. But then, this is coming from my personal experience during an exchange semester in Europe. I met some French people and Italians, and so they also have their regional languages, right? So I made the mistake of just assuming that there would be just one language in France, and that is French. But then there were other people who had their regional languages, and what was sad was that so when I asked them what their language was, if they said that their language was the regional language, I can't remember the name exactly, then another person who speaks French, they would just look at this person as if this person is creating a huge act of betrayal, because according to them, if you're from France, you have to say that your language is French. If you say that your language is any other regional language, you're kind of betraying the country. You're a traitor, and you're not patriotic enough, basically. And same with Italy as well. So I was thinking, I think we have it a little better because we kind of acknowledge that we have different languages, whereas it might be a little harder for people in Europe, because Europe is where you're expected to follow this one country, one language model. But of course, that is also changing. But anyway, I just wanted to bring this issue of how former colonies have these problems, because this European nation doesn't always fit us. And I think that is because our modern interpretations of history are also very Eurocentric, and I'm going to explain that with this slide. So I think this is also a map that we are familiar with if we've done Sri Lankan history. We learn of Piti Rata, Maya Rata, Hunu Rata, but the thing is that when we read the word Rata now, we think of it in terms of country, but and country in terms of the Western concept of country and nation. But the thing is, this Rata means something completely different. It does not have the same connotations as Rata as we know it now. So I'll just take the example of the conflicts with the Chola Kingdom and kingdoms in Sri Lanka. So they are usually seen as ethnic wars between the Sinhalese and the Tamils. But this is not. This is a very modern way. This is a very modern way of looking at this conflict, because it was not really an ethnic conflict. In Shanmugadasan, in his book, A Marxist Looks at the History of Ceylon, he says that during this time, people did not look at these conflicts in terms of ethnicity. And if back then they knew that we were looking at it in terms of the Sinhala and Tamil conflict, they would have found it very strange, because they simply did not conceptualize this whole, ethnicity issue. They saw it, what they saw it was as a power struggle between feudal overlords. So these were feudal systems. And there were Sinhalese people fighting for the Chola kingdom, and there were Tamil warriors on the side of the Sinhalese kings as well. And this was because the Sinhala king and the Chola king, they were just feudal overlords. They weren't fighting based on their ethnicity. They were fighting to impose their feudal power more than their ethnicity, because ethnicity as a concept didn't really exist for them at the time. So if they if they knew that, we were talking of it in terms of ethnicity, they would have race and ethnicity. There was a conversation about race on the WhatsApp group as well. Yeah, we'll keep race aside, but ethnicity, if they knew that we were talking about it in terms of ethnicity, they would have found it very strange. So this is just to show how complicated all these identities are, because you have the actual identity that they followed, but then in our modern 21st century interpretation of it, we read it in a completely different way, and then we have problems over it. This is just another example of how we are sort of controlled by a sort of Eurocentric perspective. And then how are nations formed? So I think the easiest example we can talk about is the partition of Hindustan into Pakistan and India, and then later Bangladesh. Again, this was pretty random, right? So this was the bloodiest, most brutal human exchange in history, or at least one of them. And then you have someone just drawing a random line, the Radcliffe partition line, and then how people just couldn't figure out what to do. So we've been living in this place that is now Pakistan our entire generations, and now we just have to shift just because we are Hindu. And then India, people living in India, if they were Muslim, they had to shift to Pakistan, leaving everything that they had behind. So how do you demarcate all these national identities and citizenships and everything? And then another example is, of course, Africa. You might have heard of the Scramble for Africa. It's called the Scramble for Africa when 13 European countries and the United States got together. They saw that Africa was full of raw materials that could be exploited. And then they got together and they just randomly drew these lines all over, and they said that, I'm going to take this bit and you're going to take this bit. So that happened at the 1885 Berlin conference. So even Africa, the kind of image that we are fed about Africa is that, there were tribes everywhere, but then they were also kingdoms, just like India or Hindustan was. You had the Maharajas and their kingdoms. So pretty much like that, Africa also had its kingdoms, which was sort of annihilated. So again, you see here then, it's like that, did the chicken or egg come first question? So did the map come first, or did the reality, the geographical reality come first? So these are some of the examples, and this is also a very interesting example. So even in India, you have Kashmir and the border dispute, right, between India and Pakistan. So Pakistan says that Kashmir belongs to them. India says that Kashmir belongs to India. And then you have China also trying to claim some, I think China claims Arunachal Pradesh somewhere here, and which they believe is part of Tibet, and which China, China also thinks that Tibet belongs to them, right? So, so it's very interesting if you look at textbooks. So obviously the same textbooks can't be sold in India, Pakistan, and China, because you can't have a textbook where Kashmir belongs to Pakistan and give it to India. So so this is a problem that European or American or British, mostly British and American, mostly British or American printing presses have. They always have to make different versions of textbooks when they're sending India, Pakistan, and China. And if you take the individual world map, so if there's a world map that China made up, they're going to mark Arunachal Pradesh as their territory, and a world map that India makes is going to have Kashmir as their territory, and then likewise with Pakistan. And then you have this is the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan, the Durand line. It's called the Durand line, just like the border between India and Pakistan is called the Radcliffe line. Pakistan and Afghanistan is separated by the Durand line. So the Durand Line was also drawn during the British Empire. So the thing is, the funny thing about this is Afghanistan does not recognize the Durand Line. Afghanistan says, why do we have to have a border between Pakistan and Afghanistan? We are all brothers, we come from the same country, and we don't recognize this Durand Line, and therefore in their maps, they don't have the Durand Line. But then Pakistan obviously wants the Durand Line because of threats from Al-Qaeda, and I mean, there's so many complications. So they want to recognize the Durand Line. So they're always at conflict regarding this issue, whether to have the Durand Line or not to have the Durand Line, and then they're sort of always fighting with that, not fighting, but there's some sort of tension between the two countries as per the recognition of the Durand Line. So you see, these world maps are not the same even in the same region, obviously, and then maybe in our country as well. When we had the war, the country's map would have looked very different based on where you were living. So you see, maps are definitely political, and they're socially constructed, they're human-made, and these are just some of the examples. And this is China. I'm not exactly sure of the history of the implications of this, but there's something called the 9- and 11- line. I'm not really sure of how that works out, but anyway, according to Chinese maps, I think they have they have the 9- map, where they show that certain territories in South China Sea belong to China. Whereas in US maps, they have an 11- map, which show that these territories don't belong to China. So again, another example where maps differ from place to place, from political ideology to ideology. And then let me get to the question of, so I asked the question, is a nation always a country? So here is an example of a nation which is not a country. So here you have Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, and then you have this pink part. So this pink area is Kurdistan. Or Kurdistan according to Anglo-centric pronunciation, but yeah, Kurdistan. You have the Kurd people. They're minorities in these respective countries, but as a nation, they're quite big. So what they're doing is they're fighting in all these countries for their independence. They want to be one independent nation. But then for various political reasons, Kurdistan has been divided, and probably purposefully as well, because coming together they would be quite a big country. But they're fighting, and Kurdistan is not officially recognized as a country, but they believe themselves to be a nation. So that question that also questions the whole geographic nature of nation and country as well, because you don't have to, because according to a certain school of thought, you don't have to be in one place to consider yourselves as a nation. And then one other example of that is Central Asia. So when the Soviet Union came apart in 1991, there were 5 countries in Central Asia that were born, basically. So Tajikistan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kyrgyzstan. So even in these countries, the belief is that, or I think it might be a fact, but I'm not sure of what alternative perspectives think of that. But anyway, the accepted belief is that Joseph Stalin, under Lenin, I think he was People's Commissar under Lenin's government. So Joseph Stalin deliberately arranged these countries, delineated geographical borders between these countries, so that there would be only minorities in all of these countries. So you have some Kazakh people in Tajikistan, and then you have some Uzbek people in another country. So very much like here you would have, so all these ethnic communities that spread into different countries, and this was obviously so that they wouldn't have enough power to get together and pose a threat to Russia, I guess. So this is also very much one of those where where they try to control people by divide and control, basically, right? Something that we are quite familiar with. And then there are also ethnic Russians in other countries. So I think that is one of Putin's arguments as well. He says that Russia lost their territories for various reasons, but the people remain in it. So there are Russians in Ukraine, and there are Russians in all these other places. And what he says is that eventually we are all going to come together, and I guess that's what he's doing at the moment. So it goes without saying that in world maps made by Russia, then Ukraine is part of Russia. And in world maps made by every other country, Ukraine is an independent state. Yeah, so this is also just to shed some light on what's happening in the world currently, right? And then I think the names that you see on the world map are also quite important. So so we have the name Africa, right? So Africa is a Greek and is a Greek word, I think, Africa. And Asia is also a Greek word, which means to the east. So Asia is to the east of Greece, and that is why it's Asia. And this is a word that we still use. But then living in Asia, like, what is east to us? Like, who are we east to? So that's also a question. Like, why are we still called Asia if it is just a direction in a direction used by Greece, and Greece was at the time seen as the center of the world, and Africa is also a Greek word. But then the original name for the African continent had been Alkebulan. Okay, so here Alkebulan. So that had been the original name of the African continent. And then, I mean, we should pay attention to these names as well. So, for example, let's take Cameroon, Lagos, Gabon. So these are Portuguese names that were given by the Portuguese rulers, colonizers. So Cameroon. I can't exactly remember what it means in Portuguese, but Cameroon is a Portuguese name, and then Lagos means lakes in Portuguese, and Gabon means cloak in Portuguese, and they had put that name because the shape of Gabon had been the shape of so there's this river called Como River here, somewhere here. And the shape of that river had been the shape of a cloak. So because of that, Portuguese named the country as Gabon, which means cloak in Portuguese. And then you have Zimbabwe. So until 1979, Zimbabwe was Rhodesia, right? So Rhodesia, obviously, that was named after Cecil Rhodes, the guy who said that he owned Zimbabwe and South Africa. So until very recently, then it was named after the person, after the colonizer. And then even South Africa, South Africa's original name had been Azania or Azania, I'm not sure. So there is actually a petition going on right now. It has been going on for a few years actually, that they should change their country's name to Azania, because South Africa is an imperialist name, and just as Zimbabwe changed their name. You see, and also Ghana. Ghana was, I think, Gold Coast at one point, but then they changed it to Ghana. So it's a good thing that Ghana and Zimbabwe changed their names, because if they didn't change their names, we are going to, forever follow that faulty myth that these countries were not civilized and they had no culture. I mean, that is the kind of information that we are being fed, right? That Africa did not have any culture or civilization, and then the Europeans came and gave it to them. So it's good that these, at least some countries, decided to change their names, because otherwise we would have, believed the same. And I think people still do. But it's good that they ultimately change their names. So you see, even the naming of different countries, of different territories, has an impact on us. It has a psychological impact on us. And then this is I kind of like this. I find it interesting. So this is a stamp of Argentina, and I'm not going to talk about the Falkland Wars. So let's leave that aside. But I just want to bring some interesting tidbit. So Argentina is here, and they've marked part of Antarctica as also part of Argentina. So Antarctica is not a piece of land that can be owned by anyone. I mean, people do claim, I think Australia has claimed like 42% of Antarctica's landmass, but it is not something that belongs to any country. But Argentina has included this in their stamp to say that this is Argentina and this is also part of Argentina. So, you're ingraining it in your citizens, and since from a very young age, that this is also part of your country, and it makes it all the more easier to go and plant oil rigs or whatever that they want to do. So this is not obviously conspiracy theory. This is how political psychology works. And then we have other instances in history, like the Mexican Cession in 1848. So you have all these red states in the United States, how these anti-immigration red states, how they're like, go back to your homeland. But then if you take territories like California, Nevada, and Texas, for example, Texas is one of those. Yeah, Texas is one of those strong red states, right? So even Texans are also like, go back to your country. They tell Mexicans, go back to your country. But then actually Texas belonged to Mexico at one point, until there's a whole history to that, where I think they allowed people from the United States to stay in Texas, but then sort of United States sort of encroached and took it over. So people who say go back to your homeland, they're already in the homeland of those, these original people. They are actually in their homeland. So so that brings into question all of these boundaries once again. And then you have Alaska, which was once part of Russia, and then America bought it from Russia in 1867. So again, you have this changing of sudden change and shift of nationalities, or whatever, who gets to own these parts of land. Right, so this is, I just wanted to bring this in. So this is a map I created, because you don't usually see this map. You don't see maps like this anywhere. So you see, you have Russia here and you have United States here. So what would happen if this was the world map that we were exposed to? So look at this. This is only 3.84 kilometers between Russia and the United States. So that's around 2.4 miles, I'm guessing. So so you see how close these two countries are, and then you also see how big Russia is in comparison to the United States. So having a world map like this is extremely dangerous, given the current political scenario, current political context. And there's a reason why we don't have this as the world map as well. There's a reason why it's the other way around, and not this way. So if this was a world map, then I don't know, some of us might think that, Russia is the absolute leader in this, whole power struggle between the two powers. So again, we don't have a map like this, again, because of things like political psychology. The map is the other way around. The map is drawn the other way around because of a certain kind of political psychology. So this is just to show how maps can be drawn in alternative ways, and that brings to my next question of projections, my next section of projections. So this projection, Mercator projection, that came about in 1569, is the most popular and most commonly used world map today. So this is what we marked when we were at school as well. So, and now with, so Google has incorporated this Mercator projection into its satellite mapping system. So this map's position as one of objective truth has been stabilized and cemented. So this emerged in the 1500s when European powers were going out colonizing other countries. So this was a good map at the time, right? Because it was this was the first map to actually make ship navigation easy. It sort of changed the constant need for ships to recalibrate by making all angles in the maps constant. So they made use of latitudes and longitudes here, and that sort of helped preserve true geometric angles between each country. So this was a very convenient map for European travelers, for colonizers, and they could very accurately go to wherever they wanted to go. However, there is one criticism of this map, which is a large criticism, actually, something that we shouldn't miss, is that it does not depict the sizes of the countries accurately. So you see, what you will notice mostly is that Africa is actually much larger than the other parts of the world. Actually, the south is much larger than the top, but then this was the Gall-Peters projection, which came in 1885, and then they started criticizing the Mercator projection, saying that you've got all the countries wrong, you've got the sizes of the countries wrong, but this is the accurate method. Right, but then again, this also has some. The reason that this didn't really last for long is that even though the sizes are accurate, the distances between the countries was proven to be inaccurate. So this is why it didn't really hold on for a long time. But then again, we can question that again. So in our current world, we don't use ship navigation as much as we did previously. So it's mostly by air, but there are certain ships, but then it's not obviously as common as it used to be. So then in this current world, do we really need to have a map that is accurate in terms of maritime lengths and diameters and everything? Isn't it also important to show that these countries are this particular size, and the placement of these different countries? So anyway, but again, like I said before, no projection can be 100% correct. So this is just to show you a comparison between the two. And again, even the second map, even though I say that the sizes are accurate, this was also I think Peters. He was a Marxist, which means that he was obviously not in good favor of the Americans, and he also didn't like the Americans. So he was trying to discredit whatever the Americans also did. So even that is political. So everything is political. So this is just a comparison of the two maps. And to this date, we use this world map, the first one, Mercator projection, in schools, in Google satellite, So to this date, this map from the 1500s is what we are still using. So that kind of says a lot about how cartography has sort of stagnated. So I think in this light, I think it would be suitable to look at maps prior to this 16th century and see the spirit of the ages which may have affected the making of those maps. So this map is the earliest surviving object that represents the whole world in plan from a bird's eye view looking down on the earth from above. So this is the Babylonian map, which is supposed to be the first world map. And it's related to Babylonian cosmology and narrates the creation myth of the battle between two Babylonian gods called Marduk and Tiamat. So this map is centered on Babylon, and this and there's a physical expression of these gods' accomplishments and the creation of Earth and the subsequent achievements of human civilization. So this is the Babylonian map that was circa 600 BC. And then you have the genre of maps called Mappa Mundi. The Mappa Mundi, they were maps or map paintings rather, that originated in the classical tradition and adopted by the Christian church. So its primary purpose was to instruct the faithful about the significant events in Christian history, and not necessarily to record precise locations. So recording precise locations was never really a preoccupation of maps. What they wanted to do was to show the significant events in Christian history. And it was also about finding the path to salvation. So if you see here, this second map, the center of the world is Jerusalem. So you have European, and look at the orientation is tilted, right? So you have Europe here, Africa here on the right side. So it's tilted. And then you have Jerusalem here. So what we can understand from this map is that this was a time which was primarily concerned with salvation and spirituality. So this is called the Omphalos syndrome, where people believe that they were divinely appointed to the center of the universe. So this is some common thing that has appeared in a lot of maps, where they believe that they were the center of the universe because that was where their god resided. So there seems to have been this collective consciousness in the belief of divinity and their duty by divinity. So each map then is shaped by its own belief system, which was believed to be true by the people of that specific spatio-temporal culture. So then if maps like this, and this is a map from China, okay, so here if you look at this map, you see that Africa is here, right? And again, it's a little different. So you see Russia and that part of the world. So the map that I made for myself, that is what is depicted here in this ancient Chinese map. So you see, people have been drawing world maps in different ways all the time. And this is, I'm not sure, I think, yeah, so this is Egypt. Yeah, so this is Egypt right in the middle. And then you have, so again, the orientation is completely different. So you have China somewhere here, and Egypt right in the middle, and the Nile. Yeah, Constantinople, Andalusia, that is somewhere in Spain, and then Russia here. So everything completely tilted. So people have been drawing world maps in different ways all throughout. And then we have this world map by Ptolemy. So Ptolemy actually didn't draw this world map. He had just written about it in his books, and then someone else drew the map according to what he had written. So the funny thing about Ptolemy's world map is that so this is generally regarded as the first world map, by Western standards. He has drawn Europe, Africa, and Asia only here. So the funny thing about Ptolemy is that he never wanted to draw, he never wanted to write about something to show the precise locations of everything. He was above everything. He was an astronomer, an astrologer, and he was obsessed with trying to find out a way to make better horoscopes. And that is how he came up with the concept of longitudes and latitudes, because then you could, find a specific, you could, it would make it easier for you to, connect the dots and, find the person's birthplace and birth time, and then, make horoscopes. So he was just an astrologer. And, people laugh at astrology, saying that, it's an occult thing, but then these boundaries between astronomy and astrology, they were always very fluid, and that was a science back then. So all these things that people call occult and laugh at, they were actually the basis of what we call science now in the 21st century. So you see, even the premise of this world map is not objective. He had in his mind, he just wanted to find a better way to make horoscopes, and that's kind of funny, especially coming from a culture that is sort of obsessed with horoscopes as well, the zodiac signs as well. So that is just some interesting tidbit. This is an interesting image that I wanted to show. Now, this is called the blue marble image, and this was the original blue marble image that was captured by NASA in 1972. So I don't know if you can see this, but this is actually of the Earth upside down. But when they released this picture to the public, they decided to shift it, because otherwise, having this image out there would confuse people. So they decided to shift the sides, but then the original picture had the world, upside down. So that says something about orientation as well. Does orientation, as we know, actually exist, or is that also a construct? Maybe this is something that we think of as objective reality, but then there is no orientation to the Earth, perhaps. I don't know. That is just something that I read about, and not a conspiracy theory again, but this is something that was that was true. The original blue marble image. So the Earth is probably not something which has a fixed orientation, right? I mean, we know that it keeps revolving and revolving especially. So it is not something that has a fixed orientation, but the orientation is something that we have fixed upon the Earth and everything else that we do. I mean, it's simply, the Earth just simply exists in space. So the idea of orientation is one that has been imposed in the world by humans, and humans alone. So I'm returning to this upside down version of the map. So the map as we know it isn't obviously wrong, right? I mean, I don't have the authority to say that it's wrong, obviously. And I think it's pretty amazing that they were able to do all of that, all of the drawing of the map without, having knowledge of satellites at that time. So if that map is obviously not wrong, but it does have its problems. And we could try to look at alternative ways of looking at the world too. So this is actually a map. Okay, so yeah, so this is this map came up in 1979. MacArthur's Universal Corrective Map of the world. This was one of the many maps that came up which challenged the idea that Europe should be at the middle of the global map. A map that challenged that the northern hemisphere should be at the top, right? Because when you have something at the top, there are specific positive connotations as well. So even in language studies, people analyze this. Analyze how the current world map has affected people's ideology, because heaven is something we usually see as up, right, and hell is down. And then you look up to someone when you respect them. And then when things go wrong, people say things go south. And the countries in this up hemisphere enjoy all these benefits over those in the down hemisphere. So in response to all of this, the MacArthur's Universal Corrective Map came along. This is the most dramatic south up map there is, because it has Australia right in the middle. So this was an sort of Australian propagandist map. So but the thing is, this could have been taken seriously by academia, but the thing is, it has a very nationalistic, dogmatic way of putting things. They're like, let me read it for you, because it's kind of interesting. At last, the first move has been made. The first step in the long overdue crusade to elevate our glorious but neglected nation from the gloomy depths of anonymity in the world power struggle to its rightful position, towering over its northern neighbors, reigning splendidly at the helm of the universe, never again to suffer the perpetual onslaught of downlander jokes. So, because Australia is constantly being mocked at for being downland, right? So, implications from northern nations at the height of a country's prestige is determined by its equivalent spatial location on a conventional map of the world. This map, a subtle but definitive first step, corrects this situation. No longer will the South wallow in a pit of insignificance, carrying the North on its shoulders for little or no recognition of their efforts. Finally, South emerges on top. So spread the word, spread the map. South is superior, South dominates. Long live Australia, ruler of the universe. So you see, it's a little hard to take something like this seriously because of its dogmatic connotations. This is why you can't take it seriously, especially not within the academia. But given the idea that maps are, after all maps are, after all, only a human construct, I think we can, take examples from this to sort of evaluate our usage of a map from the 1500s. So this map from the 1500s is the main document through which we see the world. So I think now the post-colonial world is only about 100 years old at most, whereas European colonization has been happening for more than 600 years. It's natural, I think, that we should still use this European words, because this post-colonial world is very young, right? It's natural that we still follow this, but then steps should be taken to look at the world in a different way, since we are sort of trying to get out of this the colonial and imperial mentality. So we should definitely look into this, and we should try to find solutions. We should try to seek different ways of looking at the world, but then again, we should also make sure that they don't come across as dogma and things that are hard to be taken seriously. So, and the very fact that we are still using a map from the 1560s definitely shows a stagnation in the field of cartography. And we always keep saying that science keeps changing, science should change, but then cartography is something that doesn't appear to have changed, at least in this aspect of cartography, the world map at least. So we must sort of right this wrong with healthy evaluation, healthy criticism, and healthy dismantling of imperial forms of knowledge. So what is geography then? I hope I managed to change your opinion on geography if you had a different opinion of geography. So is it objective? No, probably not. I think not. So understanding a map is not just about understanding the information map, but also understanding who did it and for what purposes. So a map has its definite psychological effects. So maybe I'll just show the world map that we have at the moment, so you can like sort of take it in. So maps are obviously not bad. I mean, just because they're Western concepts doesn't mean that they're bad or evil or, you know, anything like that. But the strength of maps in general could be further enhanced or enriched by including different perspectives. Because even though we say that, you know, there is some objective reality out there, I think subjectivity gives a far more real idea of reality than the concept of objective reality. So you get other perspectives in, and then you get a much more nuanced, complicated notion of how the world works. Again, we know that, you know, things happen in the world, and, you know, maps keep changing, but then we forget. So we should learn to see that, you know, these things very much, even the hard sciences, we learn so much about, you know, Isaac Newton, Albert Einstein. That is what we think of as, you know, common sense of science. But then we very rarely know of Vedic scientists or Chinese scientists or, you know, African scientists. So our common sense is basically just knowledge of Western imperial forms of knowledge and power. So it's up to us to decolonize all of this. It's up to us to, you know, go in search of different perspectives. And for this, we have to forget what we already know of the world. And we have to realize that all of this always depends on who has power. So if Australians somehow take over the world, then the world map is going to be this, right? So then you would know that, you know, Australia is in the middle, and that's because they are the world power. So so we should not be prisoners of geography. We should be critical of everything that we see, and especially in world maps as well. And we have to acknowledge that there are different ways of knowing and different ways of seeing. So and then if you the word worldview itself, worldview, so it's a view of the world, and then it's also, you know, it's a sort of perspective. So how do we change our views of the world, and how do we change our views of the world map? So so I encourage all of us to, you know, look at this world that we already know, but, you know, look at it with different eyes. Look at it with non-European eyes, if that is possible, because, you know, we are still very much ingrained with European ideas, I suppose. Right. So most of this knowledge, and I wasn't someone who was crazy about geography, but then about 4 years ago, I came across this passage in a book. This book is called Half of the Yellow Sky by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. And she had this one line which just made me go crazy over this whole concept of world maps. So this one line, this is our world, although the people who drew this map decided to put their own land on top of ours. There is no top or bottom, you see. And this one line suddenly just, you know, created an entire paradigm shift in me. And that is when I tried to experiment with all these world maps, you know, tried to sort of, you know, see how they would work if they were aligned in different ways. And that is how I came across this, you know, north, down, south up map orientations as well. And then that made me question, do we then live upside down, or do we in Asia, which means east, do we maybe live in the west, or do we maybe live in the south, or do we maybe live in the north? So these are some questions that I got once I read this line, and once I started reading into all of this. Yes, so that brings me to the end of my presentation. Yes, so end of presentation. So if you want to ask any questions, or if you want to share anything else, so that's it. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Rochana. I shall invite questions from the audience now. That was a wonderful presentation. I will start with the question, but I'll see whether there's any burning questions from the audience. Just a clarification. I think you said something about the distance between Russia and America being few kilometers. And I'm sure you are aware that Alaska was part of Russia before in 1862.
Yes,
So it was
1847.
Yeah, part of Russia. Okay, on that basis, let me see whether there are any questions from the audience before I ask mine.
And I just saw your message about Sir Desmond De Silva.
Oh, yes.
He married into Yugoslavian royalty.
Yeah, I didn't know that at all. And we met him and we talked to him. I'm sure Sati knows him. There are a few other people who know Desmond. I didn't know about that royal connection. I need to read about it. So you said he's married to a Yugoslavian, some princess, is it?
Yes, but I think they got divorced. Yeah.
Okay. Right. I need to look into that. So Tamara Tauda, you can unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I cannot get the hand going up. Yeah. So just to ask, say, in the ancient world, we have read the mariners were using the North Star for their maps.
Mm-hmm.
So was there an understanding that the north was upwards kind of a thing? Say, when we get a compass, the compass always kind of directs us to the north. So when we say North Star, say, was it always at the top of a map? That's what my question is.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. So even I think this is more to do with language, I guess. Who decided that north should be the direction that is up? So again, that is something that language has constructed. And about the compass as well. So about the magnetic field that goes to the north, there was no understanding in the ancient world that the north was at the top. And I think with the maps that I showed, some of them, even in the Christian world, even in the Mappa Mundi world, they did not follow the north as a way of going upwards. It was just a random direction. So that is what I have to say about that particular question. But I can read up more into it. But my understanding is that they did not have the understanding of the north as something that went up. It was just a direction, just a direction. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Just to add to that, there is a similar to North Star, which is visible from south. I can't remember. I was just trying to Google it. When I was in which country was it? Peru. They showed us in the night. They always take you on a tour in the night to show the night sky in Amazon, and they showed us that star. So apparently in the South Pole you can't see the North Star, and they use the other star, whichever it is.
And there's a question about what is the meaning of geography. So this is a combination of two words, geo, that is geo, and graphy. And geo is earth, graphy is writing. So writing of the earth, basically.
Any other questions?
I think there are two hands raised.
Oh, right. Okay, Carmen, go ahead, please.
Okay, I just want to comment that in addition to north and south, you have to talk about the dateline, because Greenwich is defined through England, London, and that sort of really orients where you put the two edges of the world, and also purely by convention. And I think in the Surya Siddhanta, which was an Indian text, the Greenwich of the Surya Siddhanta went through Sri Lanka. So we were actually at the center at that time with respect to the Indian people who created time zones, even though now we adopt London as the center of the time zone system. But I think there is a reason where London is sort of the most convenient, because it puts the dateline right across the Pacific, which is the least populated part of the world, and it would have been inconvenient if the dateline went into the went across Africa or any other country where the dates would change from one side to another. So I think with the current view of the world, the dateline being in the middle of the Pacific is the most convenient.
Thank you very much. Kavan, being the thinking file, which I am, I can still remember the Red Rackham's Treasure book, which most of you must have read. So they originally went in search of the treasure using English charts. And then later on, they realized that, before that, the charts used were French charts, which took the dateline through Paris. So I think Lalit is next. Lalit?
No, I just wanted to make a comment, Rochana. Thank you very much for your presentation. That's a very good, very informative. I think just two comments. One is because we are islanders, the maps and the borders really fascinates us. I find it very interesting that when I start cycling, my main passion is I'm a touring cyclist. Is this crossing the borders is a very fascinating one for us as islanders. And just for your one, what we said about when you have a small piece of land in the middle of another country, do you need to have a visa to enter that part of the country? Actually, it does. Because there is a piece of land which belongs to Russia called Kaliningrad, which is in the North Cycle route. So you have to take a long way detour to avoid that Kaliningrad. Otherwise, you have to apply for visa to Russia to enter. And just to make a comment that actually it is if you travel in Europe, the maps becomes a very fascinating one, and in South America as well. Yes, that's all. I just want to make a comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lalit. I'll give the next question to Sati.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, you may not be able to see me because I have a problem with my video, but I'll go ahead with my question, and it's in fact an observation. Rochana, thank you very much. It was an excellent talk. It makes us all think. And I also could see a parallel between geography and history, because history too is written by people who are interested and often partisan. That said, my question is, do you have any intention of making this available to younger school children?
Knowledge of like rereading the world map?
Yes, I asked this question in the context of the questions that you raised through this, because there is a wider implication to the teaching of geography through this kind of self-examination, which you are basically proposing to do. Otherwise, it will be a talk among, shall we say, a couple of professionals like us. Now, if you have, or if you get the blessings of the education department in your country, then I think this will make a lot of sense to the future generation to understand the small world they are living in and the need to redraw the maps and think beyond.
Yes, thank you so much for that suggestion. And I've already done this to university students, and I would like to do this to school students. But I also think teachers would also have to be made aware first, but because what I suggested, I'm not sure if critical cartography is still something that has seeped into mainstream geography. So I'm not sure if people are that keen on taking critical cartography as a mainstream line of study. So what my problem is, if we introduce it only to school children, if we introduce it first to school children rather, is that, there might be conflict between teachers and students, like, students might think that, teachers are narrow-minded, and that is not going to bite very well as well. So I think there should be a huge, sort of paradigm shift in the way these things are taught anyway. But yes, of course, we can do what we can. And so teaching this to school children is definitely something I'm very much interested in. So thank you so much for that. I will do that if I ever get the chance to.
Thank you. I may just quickly, if Ruan allows me, make 2 more comments.
Sure.
I think the first one is in relation to Ruan's question about Desmond de Silva. There are 2 interesting things that I can add. I'm sure this may have been addressed already, but I probably didn't hear it. Yes, he was married to Lady Katrina of Yugoslavia, whom she, I think, as one of the participants alluded to, he divorced. But interestingly, being a brilliant lawyer as he was, he has also apparently commented that the reason for the divorce was that she did not stand up to him intellectually. An interesting comment if it was true. The second thing is to just thank you once again for a brilliant piece of work you've done.
Thank you so much.
That brings us another question where intellectual compatibility is an essential feature in a marriage. I wouldn't get into that. Let's give a chance to Lakshmi.
Thank you, Ruan. I must first thank Rochana for such a fluent and vast amount of research she has done to give this presentation. Thank you. And we are very proud that we have such academics in Sri Lanka. My question is very simple. When the port city is built in Colombo, will the map of Sri Lanka change very much?
Probably. I don't think I want to answer that, but yeah, probably. We might be represented in a certain color, maybe, in future world maps. But yeah.
That is the thing. I mean, you get, very controversial subject, and it is very difficult to introduce such things because everything is controlled and governed by politics and other human interests. So that's why I said now. So people have different ideas about the port city, and it is going to, they say it's going to add some land out of the sea. So you have to reduce the ocean and add something to this thing, and I don't know whether it will go as China or Sri Lanka.
This is not unique, Lakshmi. I think was it called Palm Island in Saudi Arabia, is it? Yes, they have built another city like that. So there have been several made up cities throughout the world, which appears in the map.
Okay.
Let's move on to.
Thank you and good luck.
Thanks, Lakshmi. Tarosha Rajaratna.
Hi, I'm actually new to this this talk, and actually it was Rochana's invitation that I'm here. And wonderful talk, Rochana, first of all, and to be honest, I learned quite a lot from you. Another fan of maps, actually. So now I have a few comments about the Mercator projection. One is not actually a comment, but actually a clarification. So I have heard about this story. Now, during the development of the Mercator projection, now the story goes as, if I'm correct, it was some pope who asked one of the cartographers to come up with a projection such that the Western or the Catholic superiority is depicted on the map. I'm not exactly convinced about as to whether that's true, because now in cartographic or in geometric sense, the Mercator map makes sense because the angles are preserved, which is why we still use the Mercator projection even for like street maps, Google Maps, whatever that is. Because if you take a left turn on the map, you actually make a left turn. The angles are preserved, which is why we still use the Mercator projection. So I would like to ask your opinion on the story I told you, and about the Greenwich Mean Time, like some other member pointed out. So I'll add some comment to that as well. Now, the reason why England was chosen to be the center of the world was that the Greenwich Mean Time was developed in the late 19th century. So there was a whole lot of problems because each country had their own local time zone, and when there were trains that came from one country to another, these time zones clashed. So what they did was the industrialized countries, they met in London, I think. I'm not exactly sure. The reason why England was chosen was that they had the political upper hand at the time. It was quite a large empire, and they had the say to pick, let's say, the center of the world goes from England, and then they chose Greenwich. I think there was an observatory in Greenwich, and it was quite easy for them to set that as the GMT 0. I think those were the comments, the clarifications. Thank you, Rochana, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Thanos sir. So let me answer your second one. So yes, that's exactly how it happened according to what I've read as well. And from what I know, France refused to adhere to that, and they followed their own time zone for about 5 to 10 years, I think. And then they had to shift because they had no choice. They didn't want to follow England because, at one point in history, France overpowered England, so they didn't want to bow down to England. And the first one, I have heard of the Pope story, but I'm not sure. Like you, I am also not sure of its accuracy. So thank you so much, Thanos, for the 2 comments and questions.
May I add a little bit to that? I recently had a chance to do a travel in the Trans-Siberian. It's a very interesting travel because the train uses Moscow time throughout, but then they also say that your local time, you have to set it up as we go. So there, we cross so many different time zones, and every day we wake up and spend about 1 hour trying to figure out where we are and what's the time. Because from Moscow time it could be 8 o'clock in the night, but from the real time it's it's light up. It's such a chaos in that, but that's part of the journey. So I'll give the next question to Amitabh. Amitabh?
Yes, good evening, everyone. So I am Amitabh, and I am in this talk due to a last-minute invitation from Rochana. And yeah, maps. I'm not a cartographer or a very big cartography enthusiast, but yeah, maps do interest me. And my question was also, which I put in the messages, was also to do with the Mercator projection, which shows the poles to be larger. Higher the latitude, the bigger the place looks compared to near the equator. So what I want to know, does it affect the thinking and writing about different places due to this? For example, Africa is actually much larger than what it looks on the map, whereas Australia is not that big as it looks. And the distances which Sir has traveled with 8 time zones, a similar distance, say, in Africa would have probably just 2 or 3 time zones at best. So how does it affect the literature or the writing or the thinking of people because of this?
Thank you so much for the question. So I think it affects people in the sense that we are always made to believe that, you know, Africa is this, you know, small, downtrodden place, continent, or rather place, landmass, which needed help and civilization. I think if we just look at the map as it is, as we know it, we wouldn't really, you know, come to think of all of that. But when we see the map where the continent is actually bigger, that is when we realize that, okay, we have thought of this continent in a different way. So if we had actually seen Africa for the size that it actually is, as a large continent, we would have had a different opinion of it, that it's something very powerful. But right now, what we see of as powerful is Europe, because that's in the middle, and then we see as powerful United States because it looks quite big. But if Africa and South America, if they were always projected as huge as they actually are, then we would have thought of them as the powerful countries. So that is what I have to say in response to that. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Okay, that's interesting, because only when you see on a globe, you realize how big Africa is compared to other countries. And that Siberia used to look so huge to us on the map, especially when a map is hung on the blackboard. So the USSR used to look so huge. It's big. It was big, no question about it. It was not that big as it looked. So, okay, thank you.
I think having USSR also huge would also benefit, you know, a certain worldview in showing that, you know, Russia is big and, you know, it's going to capture everyone else very quickly. So that would also have helped in a certain way. Yes, thank you so much for that.
Amitabh, may I just clarify? Are you from India, right? Yeah, you are joining from India.
Yes, I'm an Indian. Yes.
Yeah, you are from somewhere in the very north. You said you're from a very cold region, right?
Yes, I'm sitting right now in Gangtok, in Sikkim.
Right. Yeah, I can remember you talking at one of the plain tea talks. Yeah, welcome, Amitabh. Thank you. Sujata next. Sujata, please unmute.
Yeah. Hello. I want to speak to Rochana, please. I just want to ask her a very personal question, if she won't mind answering me. Hello.
Yes.
Rochana, are you from Kandy High School, by the way?
I am from Kandy High School, yes.
Oh, I got that news ahead. So I was wondering, and I want to see this beautiful person. Now I see your face. I'm also a girl of Kandy High School, but an ancient old girl, not like you. To see an old girl of high school doing so well. Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Peradeniya University?
Peradeniya, yes.
Yeah, lovely. Anyway, it was a lovely presentation. Thank you. And keep your good work going. Who was the principal when you were there?
Mrs. M. Abegunasekara.
Mrs.
Mrs. M. Abegunasekara. She has been there for a long time now.
Mrs. Ekanayaka, right?
No, not Mrs. Ekanayaka.
Yeah, that's right. I remember. Thank you very much, Rochana. Lovely. Nice to know Kandy girl.
Thank you.
Bye.
Sujata, thank you very much. And I think you're taking us to a Kandy-centric view of the world, I suppose, isn't it? Anyway, I'm joking. Sati, you have another comment or question? Sati? Yeah.
Sorry for the delay. I think my neurons are far away. Rochana, this is not a question. This is just yet another observation. You'll be pleased to know that I am the only old boy of girls' school in Kandy High School.
In a primary school? Or
among this crowd, I'm the only old boy. I started my schooling in the Montessori there during Miss Paul's time. Miss Paul returned to England and she died, I think, about 5 years ago.
Okay, about 10 years ago. She was my principal too at one time.
Right, so we must be belonging to the same geriatric group.
What's her name, Rochana? What's his name?
Sorry?
His name?
Sati, Dr. Sati Arena.
Yeah, yes, and I'm in your group of.
I know
social.
his name. I know this name.
Yes.
Very
Yes.
nice guy.
Very active on the WhatsApp group.
It's lovely. Okay. Very nice meeting people now.
And also the social group, led by Chuli. I know there are two groups here, but I belong to Chuli's group.
You are in Chuli's. Chuli is one of my students. She is there. Chuli
Right.
there. Yeah, Chuli.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All world. Yeah, lovely. Okay, lovely. Thank you.
Well, we would not talk about Sati's sex change, but let's move on. That's a joke. Don't worry. I have a question, Rochana. Now, this territorial behavior. Now, lots of animals do show territorial behavior as well. We heard some time ago somebody, an expert on elephants, came and talked to us, and they said some of the elephants from Wilpattu were taken into a faraway, I think, Galloya, because of certain developments. And then after 6 months, they have tracked that elephant coming all the way from Galloya once again to Wilpattu. So there are certain animals that are very extremely territorial. So in your opinion, this territorialness, is it a human behavior, or is it a more genetic issue? We have to have a territory to be secure. What do you think?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I can answer that question.
I don't think anybody can. I just post the question.
Yeah,
so
sure.
That yeah. Anybody can? Andrew is here. I can see Andrew. Any comments on that territoriality? Is it a genetic thing, or is it just a made-up social thing?
Sorry, Ruan, I haven't thought about that topic, so I wouldn't have a view on that.
It's all right. Yeah.
Give me some time.
You got a bird behind you.
Yeah, my Kirilli. Yeah.
Right. So another comment from me is that, in day-to-day language, we seem to know lots of things, isn't it? We know the color of angels, which is white, and the devil is always black, isn't it? We know where the heaven is. It's always there. It's not there. That's the hell. So, lots of things we know, or we pretend to know, which are entirely our fabrications. Now, recently I have been reading some Buddhist literature, and I realized that even before Buddhism, even in Hindu literature, this concept has been promoted. It's about the truth. There are two kinds of truths. One is called Sammuti, one is called Paramattha Satya, which is the absolute truth. And the second kind of truth is Sammuti Satya. Now, I don't know about the Paramattha Satya, but all of we are talking is the relative truths, which are man-made. There may be very few absolute truths, and I don't think we can even comprehend. So that's another concept which I have formed over the years. All these things are just man-made concepts, just agreements that this is so, the heaven is up, hell is down, kind of stuff. I would like any comments from anybody, including Rochana.
Yeah, I definitely agree with it. I am someone who subscribes to that view that everything we see is a construct. Yes, and I'm not sure if there is an objective reality, because everything that I come across seems to be something that we have constructed.
Any other questions from the audience or comments, please? This is your time. Ananda, have you got any questions for your daughter? Or any comments? No, he's silent. Oh, there you go.
No, I would rather keep quiet.
Yeah, just to keep the peace, isn't it? Okay. Any other questions? Right, if that's the case, I think it's time for us to move on. Shall we all open up now, unmute yourself and open up the videos so that we could thank our guest speaker. And Rochana, thank you very much for that lovely presentation of yours. And thank you very much for bringing so many other of your friends as well. And I hope I have published the Sri Lankan Literary Society website. If they want, they can go and have a look and join our future meetings. And in our traditional manner, let us show our appreciation to Rochana. Thank you very much, Rochana.
Thank you so much, and thank you for listening to my presentation. I really enjoyed doing this presentation. And I also enjoy seeing all my childhood aunties and uncles as well. It's really nice to see all of you. Harish uncle, Ludita uncle, and everyone.
Well done, Rocha. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.